Chapter 4, Part 2. Conflict of Succession. Despite his success in unifying the Muslim world after the troubles of Ali's caliphate, one decision Muawiyah made would make him a controversial character and change the nature of Islamic government for the next 1300 years. He appointed his son Yazid as his successor well before his own death and demanded oaths of allegiance from the notables of Damascus. Muslim historians throughout the ages have speculated as to his reasoning for doing so, especially considering the subsequent opposition that arose to Yazid. However, keeping in mind the historical context of Muawiyah's time makes it easier to understand why the switch to a hereditary system made sense. Muawiyah's time as caliph showed the emphasis he placed on political unity and harmony. After the political upheaval of Ali's caliphate, Muawiyah's main challenge was keeping the Muslim world united under one command. Although he largely succeeded, there was no guarantee that all subsequent caliphs would be able to use external threats or political maneuvering to minimize internal divisions. Muawiyah thus felt that the only way to preserve social unity and harmony was to simply bypass wars of succession and make the caliphate hereditary. As it happened, however, the choice of Yazid was not without controversy. Unlike his father, he had never known the Prophet, and was thus without the aura that comes with being a companion. Furthermore, rumors swirled in the holy cities of Mecca and Medina of the sinful life that Yazid led. Alcohol, singing girls and excessive luxuries were to be found in Yazid's presence, a far cry from the pious and simple lifestyle Muhammad had preached. Whether or not these allegations of wickedness were accurate, they were enough for some to revolt, such as Abdullah ibn al-Jubair, the son of the Jubair who opposed Ali. Compounding the problem were the desires of some in Iraq to see a descendant of Ali take the title of Caliph of the Muslim world. Ali's oldest son Hassan had already died in Mecca during Muawiyah's reign, so support fell to his younger brother, Hussein. This grandson of Muhammad was attracted to the city of Kufa in Mesopotamia by promises of support from its people. Against the advice of Abdullah ibn al-Jubair, who warned him that the people of Iraq will desert him at their first opportunity, Hussein set out to establish a base in Iraq in 680 from which he could oppose the Syrian Umayyads, as his father had done 25 years earlier. True to Abdullah's prediction, the people of Kufa abandoned their support for Hussein before he even arrived. Yazid had already sent a new governor to the city to root out any opposition and ensure that the population does not rise up in revolt against him. And it appears to be this show of force that persuaded the people to abandon their promises of support. Hussein had been counting on that support and only traveled with about 70 family members and friends, hardly a force capable of overthrowing Yazid. At the plain of Karbala, about 80 kilometers north of Kufa, Hussein was surrounded by Yazid's forces, which proceeded to kill the would-be rebel and most of his supporters. The Battle of Karbala would later become one of the founding legends of a new, divergent strain of Islam, the Shia. Abdullah ibn al-Jubair's revolt did not fare much better. After the killing of Hussein, popular support throughout the Muslim world was against the Umayyad government. Hussein was, after all, the Prophet's dearly beloved grandson, and killing someone who had the Prophet's blood flowing through him was a shock to many of the more pious-minded. Abdullah used this opposition to Yazid to bolster his own revolt against the Umayyads, which he declared in Mecca in 680, after Hussein's death. With such support, Abdullah's revolt could not be stamped out as easily as Hussein's. In fact, Yazid was never able to do away with the revolt in the Hijaz and died in 683 without complete control over the empire. After Yazid's death, it seems that Umayyad control collapsed almost everywhere in the Muslim world. Yazid's successor, a youth who seems to have had no interest in government, only ruled for a few months before his own death. Abdullah declared himself caliph and was given oaths of allegiance by people in Iraq, Egypt, and even the fringes of Syria itself. But through a mix of tribal politics and open fighting, the Umayyads managed to regain control of the caliphate under Marwan, a cousin of Muawiyah. Under Marwan and his son Abd al-Malik, the Umayyads regained control of Syria, Egypt and Iraq, and eventually stamped out Abdullah ibn al-Jubayr's rebellion in Mecca by 692. The Umayyads had come back from the brink of extinction to regain complete control over the Muslim empire. This certainly was not the tranquility and harmony Muawiyah had hoped for when he appointed his son as caliph, but once the Umayyads were re-established. The period of civil wars between 680 and 692 seemed like nothing more than a small hiccup. In the late 600s and early 700s, the Umayyads continued with a second period of rapid military expansion and economic growth that would rival any period of expansion in Islamic history before or since. The fact that the Umayyads conquered most of Iberia in just 4 years with a few thousand soldiers indicates that they received support from the local population. Further conquests. Full consolidation of Uqba's conquests in North Africa had to be completed before further conquests could be undertaken. The Caliph Abd al-Malik sent armies to conquer Carthage, the final outpost of Byzantine control in North Africa in 698. With this, the last remnants of Byzantine North Africa disappeared for good, as the former rulers of the land were forced to retreat to Sicily and Greece. Now the Muslim armies were primed for one of the most spectacular and unlikely conquests in history. Legend has it that a former Byzantine official, Julian, appealed to the new Muslim governors of North Africa to punish the Visigothic king of the Iberian Peninsula, Roderick, who had supposedly seduced Julian's daughter while she was under his care. Julian even promised to ferry a Muslim expeditionary force across the strait to Spain to exact his revenge upon the tyrant king. Whether or not Julian really existed, reports of unrest in Visigothic Spain along with pleas from persecuted Jews and unorthodox Christians must have played a role in the decision to cross the strait and venture into the Iberian. Musa ibn Nusayr, the Umayyad governor of the Maghreb, sent a force under the command of Tariq ibn Ziyad, a Berber convert to Islam, who in early 711 landed near a giant monolithic promontory on the south shore of Spain. He established his camp near the mountain, which became known as Jabal Tariq, anglicized as Gibraltar. From this base, Tariq led raiding parties throughout the south of Spain, which proved to be generally successful, especially since Roderick and the main bulk of the Visigothic army was in the north of the peninsula dealing with a Basque rebellion. By the time Roderick was able to march his army south to meet the Muslim forces in the summer of 711, Tariq had managed to bring over an army that numbered around 10,000 soldiers from Muslim North Africa. At the decisive Battle of Guadalete, Tariq's army crushed the amassed forces of Roderick, who suffered from disloyalty in his army's ranks along with the effects of an exhaustive march to meet the Muslim invaders. Roderick himself was killed in the battle, and the underlying weakness of the Visigothic kingdom soon became apparent. Central control collapsed throughout the peninsula. Tariq advanced to take Roderick's old capital city of Toledo within a few months of the battle, and soon afterwards, cities began to fall one by one to the invading Muslims. Tariq's superior, Musa, also crossed over into Spain to aid in the ongoing conquest. Tariq was the conqueror and Musa was the consolidator. As expeditionary forces under Tariq took cities as far north as the Ebro Valley, Musa's larger army followed up to fully establish Muslim rule in conquered areas and set up civil government. In the years from 711 to 715, Tariq and Musa managed to bring the vast majority of the peninsula under Umayyad control. The seemingly improbable conquest of such a large territory by relatively small invading armies was reminiscent of the conquest of North Africa just a generation before. Many of the early Indian converts to Islam were Buddhists and members of lower castes, who were attracted to the egalitarian nature of Islam. Further raids to the north into Gaul initially proved to be as successful as the conquest of Spain. The Muslim armies managed to advance into the south of modern France, establishing their rule in Aquitaine and Septimania in the 720s. The climax of the Muslim invasion of Gaul was in 732, when armies under the Muslim governor of Al-Andalus, Abd al-Rahman al-Ghafiqi, were defeated by the Franks under Charles Martel at the Battle of Tours, in northern France. The importance of this battle has been thoroughly debated by historians. Some argue that a Muslim victory would have led to the eventual complete conquest of Europe and its subsequent conversion to Islam in the 700s. Others downplay the battle, making the point that Al-Ghafiqi's advance to northern France was nothing more than a summer raid with no aims at conquest. Whether or not the battle really was that important cannot be determined. But one has to wonder at the implications of what Muslim rule in France and beyond could have meant for European history in the Middle Ages. What makes Umayyad expansion in the early part of the 8th century so extraordinary is that it was not confined to North Africa and Spain. Simultaneously, on the opposite side of the empire, Umayyad armies were marching into an unknown land into which even Alexander's armies dared not venture. The impetus was a Muslim trade vessel returning from Ceylon that was attacked by pirates based in the northwest corner of India, Sindh. When the king of Sindh, Raja Dahir, refused to return the Muslim captives taken from the ship, Umayyad armies were again spurred to action to push the empire's borders even further. Under the command of Muhammad bin Qasim, a young man who hailed from the tribe of Thaqif, based in Taif. Although he was in his teens, Ibn Qasim proved to be an able leader under the tutelage of Hajjaz bin Yusuf, the governor of Iraq. He was sent with an army of 6,000 Syrian soldiers across Persia and into the Indian subcontinent in 711, the same year as Tariq ibn Ziyad's foray into Spain. Upon reaching the Indus River, several small communities capitulated to the invading force once given the promise of religious freedom. Aided by Buddhist temple officials, the Muslim army marched from city to city with relatively little resistance. When bin Qasim's force finally met Dahir in battle along the Indus River, the Muslims, along with locals discontented with Dahir's rule, managed to inflict a devastating blow on the Sindhi army. Dahir himself was killed in the chaos of the battle, his war elephants being no match for the flaming arrows employed by the Muslims. Like in Spain, the loss of a major battle and the death of the king led to the complete collapse of local government. Muhammad bin Qasim's forces mopped up the remaining organized opposition within months and established Muslim rule in Sindh. For the first time, a part of India was under Muslim control, although it would be centuries before Muslims would manage to establish control further into the subcontinent. For the locals living in Sindh, the Muslim conquest did not change their daily lives much. On the advice of his superiors in Iraq, bin Qasim extended the same religious freedom to Buddhists and Hindus that was already given to Christians and Jews elsewhere in the Muslim world. Temples and idols destroyed in the fighting were allowed to be rebuilt by the new Muslim governors. Once again, the relaxed terms offered by the conquering Muslims created little discontent with Muslim rule and relative social harmony. By the mid-700s, the Umayyad Caliphate stretched from Spain to India, making it the largest empire in the world just 100 years after the Islamic movement began high up on a mountain in Mecca. While expansion and conquest are usually signs of a powerful and capable government, a plot for the end of the Umayyad dynasty was being planned just as Umayyad armies marched into unknown territories, where other rebellions against the Umayyads failed. This one would succeed as it capitalized on the many different ethnic groups that were now under Muslim control and their discontent with Umayyad social policies. The rapid expansion meant that a huge number of peoples came under Muslim control who were not Muslim themselves. The percent of the population that was Muslim in the early to mid-700s is estimated to be around just 10%, the rest being a blend of Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, Buddhists and Hindus. According to Islamic law, these groups were granted religious freedom and were exempt from military service in exchange for payment of a poll tax, the jizya. Muslims, on the other hand, were only subject to a land tax and the zakat, a mandatory tax meant to be distributed to the poor. Although the jizya was usually lower than the pre-Islamic taxes of the Byzantines or Sassanids, it was still higher than the taxes paid by the Muslims. A natural economic reaction to this system would be for non-Muslims to convert to Islam in order to pay less tax. But this solution posed a problem for the Umayyad government. If all the non-Muslims in the empire converted to Islam, it would lead to a huge fall in tax revenue, making further military expeditions financially unfeasible. Consequently, a safeguard to protect revenue was put into place. Non-Muslims who converted to Islam were required to continue to pay the same jizya tax they had paid before their conversion. In theory, this would protect the Umayyad Caliphate from losing a valuable tax base and ensure that all conversions would be sincere. In practice, it meant institutionalized discrimination based on race. Since the Arabs had almost entirely converted to Islam before the Umayyad Caliphate began, the only people who were converting into the religion were non-Arabs such as Copts, Greeks, Berbers, and especially Persians. They were the only Muslims paying the jizya, while their Arab brothers in faith were exempt. The intention of the Umayyads may have been to protect their tax base, but the policy ended up having a racial aspect, keeping non-Arabs at the bottom of society while Arabs rose to the top. From a religious perspective, this directly contradicted Prophet Muhammad's call for unity during the farewell pilgrimage, when he famously proclaimed, "No Arab is better than a non-Arab, and no non-Arab is better than an Arab." An attempt was made by the Caliph Umar bin Abdulaziz to undo the un-Islamic taxation policy during his reign from 717 to 720. Although his reforms were widely popular with the non-Arabs of the empire, he was distrusted by his own family for his views of equality and was poisoned by the Umayyad clan just 2 years after taking power. Later Muslims would give Umar to the honorary title of the fifth rightly guided caliph because of his religious-minded reforms, but in the end, his reign would be nothing more than a small hiccup in Umayyad policy. With ever-increasing numbers of non-Arabs accepting Islam, dissatisfaction at the unequal tax policy of the Umayyads grew. Riding this wave of discontent, another old family of Mecca rose to take control of the caliphate for themselves, the Abbasids.